Be a 45-second count. Rob Sanchez. I'm with Mouth Media Network, and I'm here with Matt. Matt, I'd love to have you give a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Matt Bitner-Glindzicz. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Dallas, Texas originally, but I've called St. Louis, Missouri home for the last 8 years now. I'm an engineer by trade, but now I'm an entrepreneur and the co-founder of nCase Tech.
Excellent. Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about your background and kind of what led you to the point you're at right now, and then we can get into what nCase does and kind of talk about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me a little bit about what led you into the path you're on now, like what starting with like schooling and that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it all kind of starts when I got to St. Louis in the first place. After I graduated high school, came here, got a full ride to attend WashU in St. Louis. Easiest decision I ever made, and thankfully it was very serendipitous. That turns out the love of my life was my freshman neighbor in our dorm room, our freshman year. Immediately fell in love with her. We've been together ever since, and that's an incredibly important detail of our journey of where we've ended up, because through trials and tribulations and uh, personal bits of that were extended from that relationship. So loss that she had experienced, losing a childhood best friend to an opioid overdose 2 years into our relationship, and then staying in St. Louis because she got into WashU Med School, and co-founding our business together because she ultimately had the idea for it in the first place. And here we still are in St. Louis 8 years later, and was a full-time engineer, and had gone after I graduated college, was with a company where I was building optical sensors for extreme environments. So think spectrometers for Mars rovers to find signs of life under the soil of Mars, and
Nice.
things like that, deep ocean probes and very high level tech. Loved that job, probably never would have left it, but unfortunately got laid off at the start of last year and was looking for what came next. And that was right around the time where we had a couple of friends have a similar situation to the loss that my fiance had experienced when they had come across somebody overdosing on the side of the road here in St. Louis. And despite the fact that they owned Narcan, the drug that could have saved him, none had it on hand. And when we heard that story, we started asking the question of what could we do to change that and make sure that somebody who actually owned it would have it on hand. And here we are now solving the problems we are.
Excellent. So, for you, when you went to school for the first time, did you have like a path in mind? Were you pretty set on what you wanted to do, or was it a process of discovery?
So when I got to WashU, I was dead set. I wanted to either do something in aerospace or space tech related. So that job I had out of school was perfect for me. It was exactly what I wanted to be doing. That was in my mind, my calling in life. That was exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do my undergrad degree in mechanical engineering, which I did. And then that extended into getting a couple master's degrees in mechanical design and dynamics and material science as well, all of which led really well into that idea of pushing the space frontier forward and pushing humanity's boundaries further. And that was always the goal. And that's always exactly what I wanted to do. Something at least high minded like that.
Yeah. Okay. And now, as you started to look at what was there, what was going through your head after the layoff? What were you starting to think about, and what led you to the actual process of deciding to make the leap into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. I was so burnt out when I was laid off. It was I was in a bad place mentally and physically. I was honestly unsure if I even wanted to continue being an engineer, if that was actually my calling in life, like I thought it had been that whole time. Um, and then, like I said, it was that pretty much that same week I had been laid off that we have a few friends who own Narcan, aren't carrying it with them, and somebody ends up losing their life because of that. And when we heard that story, my fiance comes back into the apartment and says, there has to be something we could do that would actually help save lives in these instances. And the moment she said that, that was a new type of calling, and understanding that there was something I could do as a design engineer that a lot of people who maybe had been looking at this problem in the past couldn't, and that I actually had the resources to see something like that out. I wasn't dead set that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I felt a societal responsibility to, or at least to see this out and see what it could become. And at that point, one thing just snowballed into another, and here we are a year and a half later, still playing the game.
Excellent. Um, when you're thinking about I can solve this, where did your mind go initially? Were you thinking about how do I redesign the actual delivery mechanism from the beginning, or was it just like, hey, I know I can think through this problem? What was kind of like that universe of thought on your side?
Yeah, a lot of it was driven by my fiance, right? Because she was the one who first asked that question. And when she asked that question, her first thought was, what if we put it on a keychain? That was the first statement,
Yeah,
and that then snowballed the rest of the thought into everything else. Of course,
yeah,
we had to continue to evaluate the problem, and then it was then diving actually into it and getting into the nitty gritty and understanding what is it that is keeping people from carrying it, and diving into that and trying to solve one problem at a time to overcome all of those barriers all at once. But also, my fiance and I have always believed in simple solutions. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel here. We were just trying to come up with just an extra solution that could just bridge that gap slightly. And I think that's exactly what we've done.
nice. So that's a good spot to kind of jump off into what you've actually built. Do you have an example? I should have
Yeah,
checked. Yeah,
absolutely. So this is the case we have now. We have called it Nalox 1, similar to the name naloxone, the generic name from Narcan. So it has a keychain hook that can attach onto belts, bags, keychains, anything like that. It is just a simple pull from the front, and it keeps your Narcan more durable, more convenient, and easy to carry, and all those things. You can just easily slide it back in, pop
yeah.
the top back over, and that's all it is. Really, the true innovation here was that we were seemingly the first people to think, what if you took it out of the medical blister pack that it originally comes in? Because everybody else up to this point who had tried to solve this problem wanted to stick that blister pack into something else, which only made it even bulkier and bigger than it was and more inconvenient to carry. Our thought was, what if we take it out of its blister pack and put it into something that's waterproof and more durable than the packaging it comes in, so that there's no concerns around shelf life or efficacy or anything like that, and
Yeah.
then package it into something more convenient with a keychain. And that really was overall the thought. We started, when we evaluated the problem once we first heard of it, we looked at why don't people carry it. And ultimately, there's different reasons for different people, but the ultimate reasons are, number one, inconvenience. It's just bulky, and the packaging comes in doesn't fit into your life. It's not the type of thing that most people are just going to stick in their pocket and carry around with them all the time, which leads them to leave it on their shelf or leave it in their car, somewhere where they think maybe it's accessible, but it actually isn't in times where they're likely to run into somebody who might be overdosing. It's also indiscreet. The packaging comes in as transparent, and a lot of people, even if they're willing to carry it around to help save a life, might not be willing to be associated with opioids. And so providing a more opaque, a more discreet solution for it was something that was incredibly important for helping overcome those barriers as well.
Yeah.
And then obviously also making it more durable.
So I want to take like a little step back and talk
Please.
about overdose, opioids, and things like that. If you want to share a little bit about what you've learned as you've gone through tackling the problem, that'd be amazing. Because I think it's not there's like different perceptions of Narcan out there. There's different
Absolutely.
perceptions about like why would I carry it? Why wouldn't I? I'm not somebody who would ever use it. There's so many different things around it.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to hear what you've run into as you're thinking through this problem. Also, because you're not from the medical side,
Yep.
so you're a little bit more abstracted from the exact problem, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So really what we saw when we first evaluated this, right, was a couple years ago, at a certain point, over 110,000 people were dying a year from opioids. Those numbers have come down slightly, but not by a whole lot, and for various structural reasons. But it's still something that is absolutely affecting this country and has touched every single corner of this country.
Yeah.
The reality is that Narcan is an incredibly effective and stable drug towards being able to save people who are overdosing on opioids. It's about 93% effective and can work almost immediately and bring people who aren't even breathing pretty much back to life almost immediately. It's almost a wonder drug in a lot of ways. But the problem is that even though it is 93% effective, only about 15 to 25% at most of people who own it carry it with them. But at the same time, whereas a lot of people think I would never come across somebody who's overdosing in my day-to-day life, the reality is that about 46 to 49% of overdoses occur with a bystander present, meaning that if somebody else is carrying Narcan or generic naloxone, its generic name, then they would have the power to be able to save that life. But again, the issue is that people aren't carrying it.
Yeah. And there's also, so there's a lot of instances like fentanyl exposure. There's been kids in daycare who came across it. There's been a lot of things. I lost a friend years ago to an opioid overdose. So there's a lot of these situations where we think like, oh, it's a drug user doing it at home, but it's not necessarily that. And so it could be a kid discovering a powder in a playground.
Absolutely. Uh,
And yeah,
anybody doing any recreational drug essentially should be carrying it with them, because all it takes is the slightest specks of fentanyl being laced into that, and your life can end like that. So I mean, anybody doing cocaine or methamphetamine, anything like that, should have this on hand. If there was, I believe, about 80 million fake pills were seized by the FDA a couple years ago, and just about 100% of them had some amount of fentanyl in them, and about 60% had a lethal dose of fentanyl in them, which is just absolutely insane. Also, there's other instances of even people who might not be addicts or concerned about it or think they're taking it appropriately. There's other instances in which people can still overdose, whether it's an elderly person who is given a prescription of opioids for pain and accidentally takes one too many, or somebody. There are genetic markers that can make it so that even if you have the smallest dose of opioids, you can still overdose. And a lot of people don't know that because you would need specific testing for it. And so there's all these instances where even if you think your loved ones are safe, it doesn't take a lot, and moments can happen like that.
yeah. Okay. Now you had done some research with this mechanism when you first launched that you told me about previously. I'd love to have you walk through a little bit of like what was the actual like, okay, we have this problem.
Yep.
We have this solution of a keychain. Can you walk through a little bit of that early
Yeah.
design and early testing?
Yeah, absolutely. So came up with the original idea. We tested out a few different form factors, different things like, do we make it a single body design or a multi-body design? I ended up going with single body because it was important for me that if your heart is pumping and you're trying to save someone's life, you don't have to fumble around with multiple pieces in your hand, figure out what to do with them, and then take this. Instead, you can just open this up, take it right out, and immediately save somebody's life. And so that was one of those important design features. But beyond that, there was also a lot of sanity checks that we asked. We went to every toxicologist we could and pharmacist to ask, is there a reason you can't take this out of its original blister pack and put it into something else? Will it affect shelf life or efficacy? The answers were no on those questions. We asked every harm reduction expert we possibly could, is this something people would actually carry with them? And when we got that great feedback, it was okay, let's get a working prototype in hand, which we did right at the beginning of last summer. But knowing that I'm an engineer and my fiance is a doctor, we were not going to put something out into the world like this, especially in those do or die moments, unless we had tested it and were certain of it. So we took about 120 people in and around St. Louis, gave them one of our cases, and surveyed them on the front and the back end of a couple of months. And what we ended up seeing was incredible. So only 18% of our testers were carrying Narcan who owned it often or always, so basically regularly, before we were testing them, about 18%. After a couple of months, we found 79% were carrying it often or always of those who had previously owned Narcan, which was incredible. Even better than that, of those who had not previously owned Narcan, 65% were carrying it often or always, which meant not only could we change behaviors, but we could create new ones for people. And then
Yeah.
even better than that was that 10% of our users, so about 12 people total, reported using it to save at least one life. But the most incredible part of that was that 1/3 of those, so about 4 people total, had not previously owned Narcan and used it to
Yeah.
save a life, which was the most incredible feeling imagined for me. That was the moment I got over my burnout. That what that did for my soul and spirit was incredible. but
Yeah.
also it was the proof we needed that this solution was a real one, that it was transformative and could actually make a difference in people's lives, in public health, not just in St. Louis, but across the country. And so that was the point. We said, okay, we need to take this to market and we need to launch. We can figure out some of the strategy later. We can figure out what we're doing as we go, but let's just get this out there and let's just start saving lives.
So so from that point there, what where are you at like right now? What's happened since then? Now you have this test, you have the data. And I know we connected early on when you were starting to look at how do we operationalize this, how do we find funding, like and everything like that. So like what's the situation now and what are you looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So after that testing, we manufactured our first set of units, got those set up here. We pretty much launched right at the start of the year with a Shopify store on our website so that people can just go there and buy a case from us. But that isn't the long-term goal. The long-term goal is doing this at scale and getting into the hands of as many people as possible. And that means connecting with the groups that have existing naloxone distribution systems so that we can give this to them and then they can give it to the people who need it within those channels. And that's how we grow and scale. So now it's about connecting with as many groups and organizations as I possibly can, the ones that have their boots on the ground, the ones that are actually making a difference in our communities, and getting this into their hands in order to help sell this and scale it up. And so that's where we're at now. We're still low volume. We've sold out the vast majority of our first order. And we're starting to see a lot of things start picking up, had some more media attention, getting a lot more bulk order inquiries from not just Missouri, but around the country. And now it's just about kind of riding that momentum and turning that into the next step and scaling it even further.
When you're thinking about bulk distribution, is there a point at which you can just pull the trigger? Like if somebody comes in, pre-purchases a set amount, can you manufacture to hit like what's that minimum order quantity that you can
Yeah, so I can do separate orders. I have to have about 2,500 units in is my minimum order quantity in order to get a specific order for somebody. At that point, I can customize them. I can do any color people want. I can customize the logo that we have on here if people want their own institutional branding, and can do that at over 2,500 units. Right now, the volume we've been getting from people has been a little bit lower, so we've just been delivering our generic purple with our naloxone logo. But that's the goal as we get up to that scale, is being able to offer that for groups.
Okay. And have you been thinking through like what's next? Like we have this solution, we're getting into market with this. Um what like does this product change, shift, grow, um, other form factors, anything like that? Like what are your thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
so there's about four different things I could talk about there. First, on the business side of things, the goal is to go one step meta to the groups we've been trying to connect with, because ultimately all of those groups are getting their naloxone, their Narcan from somewhere. So my goal now is to start connecting with those distribution systems wholesale and integrate straight into those systems so that I can lessen the sales burden on my end of having to connect and nickel and dime my way with every organization across the country. Instead, connect with one and therefore connect with thousands after that. That's my immediate goal and how I actually know that I'm going to scale this up. And thankfully, I'm already in partnership with certain groups to do exactly that. But on the actual physical product side, there's definitely a few interesting directions. One, I want to offer as many colors as possible. Right now, because of our small volume, we've just been stuck pretty much with our one color. It's purple because I mentioned my fiance who lost her friend. His name was Ian. Purple was his favorite color, so we made this Ian's purple in honor of him, but I want to offer every color for people. Some people want an ultra discreet solution, so I want a jet black for them, but other people don't want a discreet solution. They want it obvious. This is Narcan. And so I want to offer them a red cross red or a neon yellow or something along those lines. I want to
Yeah,
offer every pattern I possibly can because I want this to be an accessory people want to carry with them. It's not just that they feel a need to, it's that it's something that they actually see as cute, that they like holding in their hand, that they like having on their keys. And that's I think how we do that.
yeah.
And so
Well,
that's oh sorry.
real quick question about the keys. Have you run into places where it's prohibited? So like if someone's going in and out of courthouses, like an attorney or anything like that, is there anything that you have to keep in mind on that side?
Not Really, actually, there really are. There, like, you can take this through an airport. They're not going to flag it. They might ask a question about it if they see it, but it's not something that's going to be forced to thrown away.
Yeah,
No, that there aren't really any places in America where it's not allowed. And honestly, even if it was, that's also the benefit of keychain, because it's not that obvious to people of exactly what it is. So we've run into, there are some festivals that might not allow people to bring in their own naloxone, which often there are places in those festivals where they can still go get it, and there's certain groups that will give it to them. But we also have a lot of people who say, no, I don't want to do that, I just want to carry mine in. So they like the discreet solution where they can just stick it in their pocket, nobody knows what it is, they just assume it's a key fob or something like that.
yeah,
So
okay,
that is one benefit there.
yeah,
um, but so yeah, so the colors is one goal. I do want to offer, because for some cases, multiple doses of naloxone can be necessary in order to revive someone in some of
mm,
the most
okay,
extreme cases. A lot of people don't realize that. So I do want to offer a case that can hold multiple doses. However, in every conversation I've had with public health experts, they agree. I mean, this is what most people would be willing to carry around with them. Most people would not be willing to carry a 2-dose case. So we said, let's focus on the 1 dose. Let's get as many people carrying Narcan as we possibly can. And then we can focus on a multi-dose case. Plus, also, in terms of the medicine side of it, 1 dose being administered is almost always enough time for EMTs to then be able to come and give another dose. It kind of can bridge that gap before they get there. So that is also part of that benefit as well, but that's in the
yeah,
pipeline.
yeah. And then you
Um,
don't have to worry about you yourself administering multiple doses to somebody versus a trained professional doing it.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. We always tell people, call 911 if you have to administer it, always, because that person should still go to the hospital even if they are revived. But again, it can help bridge that gap. And then the other bit that's worth talking about is, even outside of this, I mean, opioids and fighting this fight against fentanyl is our primary mission. There actually is incredibly exciting developments. A lot of people don't realize that other medicines have been turned into nasal sprays in the exact same geometry as naloxone in the last couple of years. So EpiPens now exist as nasal sprays called Neffy. Seizure medication, diazepam, now exists as nasal sprays in the exact same form. These are medicines that people who are affected have to carry around with them all the time, and they're looking for a better solution to do so. And they're really loving the new nasal sprays because they're better solutions than what they had before, injectables or anything else. And so we've had a lot of interest from communities and families affected by those, asking about our product, and do we have ones maybe specifically without naloxone on them for those types of communities. And they need
yeah,
different things for them. You know, obviously I would have a different sticker on them because I don't want to link to instructions on administering naloxone if it's a different medicine. But I want to make slight changes to this case to make it appropriate for those communities so that I can serve them too. And that's part of the
yeah.
goal for the future as well.
Nice. So the form factor on the inside is the same though, right? Like it's
The
almost
exact
identical
same.
or
Yep.
exact same. Okay.
So it's
Interesting.
interesting because there's a pharmaceutical company called Aptar Pharma that holds the patent right for this form of nasal spray, and that's why it's the exact same across all of them. And also because when new medicines come up, it's way easier to get FDA approval if they do it in one that already has FDA approval than if they try to reinvent the wheel with something else. So all of
Okay.
these companies are just going with the one that exists with the one company that has the rights to it. So as long as that's the case, there's going to be
Yeah.
continue to be medicines that fit perfectly inside of this without redesign.
Yeah. Are you thinking at all about what happens if somebody's carrying multiple of the same form factor, but with different uses? Like if somebody has a seafood allergy and wants to carry naloxone, what does that look like? Uh, I don't know how you would solve that other than like maybe uh, something that you press on or some like different colors,
Yeah,
different
so we've
colors, things
talked
like
about
that.
having different labels, especially with so for
Yeah,
example, with the seizure meds. I'll talk about that for example.
yeah,
That's a much more heavily regulated substance that requires prescription. So I literally just had some conversations this last week with some families with children with severe epilepsy, and one thing they mentioned is that they would absolutely need a separate label so that they could put the prescription label on there so that they could take it through an airport or something like that.
yeah,
Also, that because there are negative side effects for giving someone diazepam who doesn't need it, that it needs to be child proofed as well. And so having a separate band on here that would make it so that a child couldn't get in there and do something
yeah,
bad. even if you didn't have the administration instructions, we could also have a sticker that says this is this. And again, a different logo, a different
Yeah.
color. You know, ideally, also people in those situations, if they're reliant on somebody else administering it for them, often the caregiver would know the difference between those things. But it is important for us that there are differences between the cases so that we can serve those communities properly and that there's no confusion, at least in those situations.
Okay. I can imagine an EpiPen that's colored like a bee or something like that.
Yeah,
Fancy.
exactly.
Okay. It's really good. So, from a where you're at right now, what do you need short term? And like what's top of mind for you? I know you said you're starting to connect with different organizations. You're starting to reach out to people that have those larger bulk distributions. Like if somebody was listening to this and wanted to be involved or help, what type of help do you need? What type of support do you want? What are you looking for?
I mean, obviously, connections to those types of groups is number one. Anybody who can help put me in front of a potential customer who can buy into this is incredibly helpful right now. But also just attention. You know, it's opportunities like this, other opportunities just to get the word out there and be able to talk to people about this. Because ultimately, so many people across this country, even if they think that maybe they're not directly affected by opioids, almost guarantee they know somebody who has been. And when you can actually sit down and talk with people and explain this to them, we can get people on board for this. We can get people carrying Narcan with them. But it's also about just having the attention and actually getting it in front of them in the first place. And so, whether that's media connection opportunities, other opportunities like this, any opportunity to get in front of people and spread the word, if that's going to conventions, getting in front of people. I love public speaking. I love getting in front of an audience and being able to evangelize on all things Narcan and naloxone. Any opportunities like that for us are huge.
Yeah. Do you need like funding for prototypes for the other use cases or anything like that? Like
We are very low on funds at the moment. I'm
yeah,
still, even in spite of all of this, I'm putting 25 hours a week into bartending right now just to keep the lights on while we do this. I'm also getting married next year. So, you know, everything in life costs a lot of money for me right now. But yes, we are actively looking at more funding opportunities,
yeah,
whether that's based out of competitions or angel investors or anything along those lines.
yeah. Are you thinking like pre-orders and stuff like that as well? Like what any like debt options, anything like that that you've been looking at, or do
Not
you
as
want to?
heavily, not as heavily on the pre-order side, but again, anybody we can connect with as a potential customer, especially at scale, anybody who has existing distribution programs or works at a company that should have existing distribution programs. A lot of the groups, like say universities, for example,
Yeah,
universities should be giving all of their students Narcan, and it's absolutely ridiculous that there's so much pushback from universities against things like that. And groups like that and others, hospitals, emergency rooms, especially maybe in more rural areas, places where these things should be getting distributed, but often aren't. Anybody who works with those types of organizations and can see that vision are people I want to be connecting with, and
yeah.
yeah.
Have you been reaching out to insurance agencies or anything along those lines?
Not fully, and that's an interesting thought. We've kind of considered that on a few different
Yeah,
instances, especially as we've tried making, at least to hospitals. When I try to sell this to hospitals, I make an argument for their ROI because ultimately, even though there's, you know, I would hope that they would just do this out of the kindness of public health and doing
yeah,
community good. At the end of the day, there is a financial argument for hospitals that says if you get more of these out in the community, and we know the rates at which people use this to save a life versus those who don't, if you can save this many more lives, or at least have Narcan being administered faster in this many instances, then that means you're going to have less severe cases showing up at your hospital. You're going to have less ICU stays. You're going to have less deaths and less reimbursed insurance costs within your hospital. And that ultimately there is a financial argument for them to be distributing this, and you know, spend $6 on a keychain and instead distribute this out into, you know, the
yeah,
community and save tens of thousands in unreimbursed costs, which then naturally leads itself right also into the insurance play as well. So it is an interesting thought,
yeah,
though I haven't taken that step myself.
yeah. Because I was thinking like a university, an insurer of a university would have a vested interest in this being distributed, whereas a university might not want to. A university might see this as I'm promoting drug use on campus, which I
Yes.
know is one of the major arguments against protections like this.
Yes,
Uh,
it is always the argument. Of course, I have to say it's
it's
BS because there's never been a study that has shown that giving people who don't use drugs Narcan is more
yeah.
likely to make them do drugs.
This is like
But
in high school, we had set up a parent network for so that there was no drunk driving after prom. And the school district shut it down because they didn't want to be known as the school district that approved drinking at prom. And it's, well, like you
it's
gotta wait.
ridiculous.
You
It's
aren't, and this behavior is happening. And yeah. But the pressure could come from lowered rates by an insurer because
exactly.
we know that your students are safer.
No, I
Uh,
think that framework is really interesting. And something I've been thinking about separate from that is this idea of how, if I have barriers with certain institutions, how do I get another institution that has a vested interest in this at that institution to instead fund it? So things like right now, I'm trying to make connections at the VA because there's such a high rate amongst veterans of opioid use and prescription and non-prescription
yeah.
that Narcan
Well,
and naloxone is incredibly important for those groups.
yeah.
Problem is that the VA is having funding slashed all the time. It also operates off of bureaucratic funding cycles and specific budget requirements. And also as a network, it's harder just to go from one and scale up from there often. But if instead I could connect with veteran organizations, maybe the Gary Sinise Foundation or any Wounded Warrior Project, somebody along those lines that would love to see more veterans carrying Narcan, then maybe I could get someone like that to fund our cases at the VA just as a distribution point and then use that as a national network to reach all those people.
Yeah.
Systems like that and trying to think outside the box like that of how do I connect these things to actually get everybody who has a vested interest in this together and working in the right direction is exactly what I'm trying to think of. So in those lines, insurance play towards universities, that makes an incredible amount of sense and I will definitely be using that.
Good, 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 good. Um, Excellent. So, at this point, is there any final thought you'd like to share? Anything that you want to kind of get out there? Um,
Just
yeah,
that I just want to see more people be open to the idea of carrying this. And so many people, the problem is that they hear this. They say, that's amazing. It's amazing you're saving lives. That's such a cool thing. The buy-in is easy because again, so many people have been touched by this and so many people get the problem. But also, so many people see this, they learn about it, and they choose not to buy it because they don't think it's still going to actually affect them. Literally this week, I've had two people I'm closely connected with. One is a regular in my bar, and one is actually a fellow bartender of mine in that bar. One of them, both of them came across people in public randomly who were overdosing in the last week. One of them, both of them knew about my product and had chosen not to buy it at that point. And both of them, the moment those moments happened, they immediately turned around and they bought one. And they said, I was an idiot that I didn't do this sooner because I didn't think it was going to affect me. And it did. And now I have to be responsible for the fact that I couldn't help in that situation. Well, actually, one of them was able to revive them, but only because his apartment was a quarter of a mile away. So he sprinted a quarter of a mile away home, grabbed his Narcan, sprinted a quarter of a mile away back, and somehow was still able to revive them. But also, about 4 minutes were lost there where they weren't breathing. And
right.
it's those moments where I just need more people to recognize this can happen to anyone. It can happen anywhere. It can happen anytime. And you don't think you need it until you do. And the last thing you want to do is not be prepared. And that's
Yeah.
just what I need people to know.
On that note, do have you been speaking with first responders about adding this to like what they're carrying in the field so that it's not an additional thing to carry?
Yeah, so we don't sell this for professional use because really in those professional use cases, either you're talking about a doctor on duty, an EMT on duty, or a police officer or firefighter on duty.
Yeah.
Almost all of those groups have accessible Narcan with them all the time. It's like you're never going to need more than 20 seconds to grab it. That all EMTs already have a way to carry it with them in their massive medical bags. Police
Yeah.
officers have holster belts that they carry it on. However, I do sell it to those groups, and those individuals are often my best customers on an individual basis, and even kind of on a customer basis for when they're off duty, because they know how to administer it. They're willing to carry it with them. They know the benefits. They know all of this, and they're down to carry it while they're off duty. But I don't try to sell this to them when they're on duty, because better solutions already exist for that. But still, I try and connect with as many of those groups as possible.
That I'm thinking like if you're in New York City, let's say, and there are different types of police officers, many of the ones who are directly in contact with the public don't currently carry Narcan.
Yeah.
So there might be like auxiliary corps or people like that that could be distribution points.
No, it's an interesting thought. Honestly, I think of our framework in Missouri is often what I just have in my immediate, and every police officer in Missouri is required to carry Narcan with them
Yeah.
by law. So it's not something that it's like been front of mind for us to push, but for especially major metropolitan areas where those differences exist, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you for talking it through with me. This has been really, like, for me, this is number one, like I said, I've lost a friend. And so like I get the use case. I'm from a area that's rural where it has high usages of meth and lots of opioid abuse and things like that. So like seeing this come up had really sparked with me when you first told me about it. And so yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit more, and hopefully people can get involved, start carrying it, and be part of this. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you, Rob. Absolutely, and just thanks for giving us the platform to tell the story.
Yeah, no problem. How can people connect, follow along, and purchase?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us on Instagram at nCase.tech, lowercase n case.tech, or you can also find us on our website, www.ncasetechnologies.com. That's also where our Shopify store is. We will be launching on Amazon here within the next few weeks, but in the meantime, you can still find us on our website.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure talking.
absolutely. Appreciate you, Rob.